We are headed to a southern state capital to explore a park where history was made, where the actions of 9 children sparked a movement and has guided change around the world. Join us as we explore Little Rock Central High School National Historic Site. I'm your host, Missy Rentz, and this is the Parks Podcast. Today we have Brian Schwiger, who is the Chief of Interpretation at Little Rock Central High School. You've been in the National Park Service for 13 years, also having worked at Hot Springs National Park in Arkansas, just down the road from here, and at Guadalupe Mountains National Park in Texas. Brian, welcome, and thank you for being on the Parks Podcast.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me and let me talk about this place that I thoroughly love.
Well, let me go through some stats, get everybody more familiar with the park. It's located in Little Rock, Arkansas. It was created when Congress established Little Rock Central High School Park as a National Historic Site on November 6, 1998. President Bill Clinton was in office at the time. It's located on 28 acres, which is made up of the Visitor Center, the high school, Elizabeth Eckford Bench, Magnolia Mobile Gas, and a commemorative garden. We'll get into all of those later. In 2022, there were 92,108 visitors. It is the only national park site with a functioning high school at its focal point. So tell me a little bit about the park, why it was created back in 1998, and its significance in the park system.
Yes. So I think that Central High School National Historic Site would exist today had it not been for President Bill Clinton, who is an Arkansan. But I definitely think that he being in office 25 years ago this November definitely expedited the inclusion of this within the national park system. And so if you look today within the national parks landscape, there are many places that are like this right down the road from us. You've got Selma to Montgomery National Historical Trail. You've got Tuskegee. You've got Manzanar in California. There are parks that are culturally resource based and talk about stories that are so interwoven in the fabric of America. And so I'm very grateful, and I'll answer your question, I promise, that the National Park Service has made a concerted effort to protect places like this and to protect stories, to have interpretation and education around these very important universal concepts and themes that are not just American. They are, world, and they cross every border and they speak every language. And so it's really great that this place was made into a national park site 25 years ago. From 1957, when this story happens, for about 30 years here in Little Rock, other than people who experienced it and talked about it, maybe with family or it being referred to in classes, it doesn't seem like that there was a large owning up to or admission of this. I know the Little Rock Nine have talked about for a long time that it was something that they didn't talk about, not out of shame, but out of just trauma. And so in 1987, the governor of Arkansas had the Little Rock Nine back to the governor's mansion to be in the place where essentially the plot was conceived to deny their entry into the school here across the street from us. And that governor was Bill Clinton. And so I think the seed was planted there in his mind from an early age as a teenager, first in Hope and then in Hot Springs, as he, like many, watched this story unfold on television. And he felt a connection to the Nine. And so when he is now in this position of authority to recognize and to shine a light on the heroes of this story, to invite them back, I think was no small acknowledgement of their importance. And so from that moment until 1997, the 40th anniversary, there begins a kind of a smaller groundswell here in Little Rock about turning something into a place like a museum, a place of memory, of recognition, a place where visitors can come and have some kind of interactive, meaningful, inspirational experience. And so some people here in Little Rock, some local leaders, business leaders, people in the community who really just felt passionately that this story needed a place like this, were able to acquire the mobile gas station, the Magnolia mobile gas station across the street with the help of the city of Little Rock. And that eventually became the first museum. Now in 1997 and beyond, it becomes the first visitor center for this national park site, a building that had been neglected in prior years, but was so important during the moments of the crisis because of its payphones, of something that's even kind of an antiquated device today, right? The media's coverage of this could not have been as widespread without payphones. And so that mobile station becoming a visitor center, having an exhibit that interpreted the story, then being handed over with greater means and greater opportunities to the National Park Service, and the creation of a national park site under President Clinton and signed into law 25 years ago this fall really is a great moment because it introduces a story to maybe national park people who only used to think of national park sites as these big outdoor open spaces. And now they realize that you can't tell the story of America without Independence Hall. You can't tell it without the MLK Memorial, but you can't tell without a place like Central High School, just like you couldn't without Big Bend or Yellowstone. And these places are America, whether good or bad, whether casting America in a positive light or some of its darker moments like Little Rock was. You have to have these places protected for everyone. And at the heart of this story is this fight for education, this attempt at equal protection, what the 14th Amendment guaranteed. And so it's great that this agency, the National Park Service, has just continued in recent years. One of the more recent additions, is the home of Murley and Medgar Evers in Jackson, Mississippi, and the story there of that incredible family that still continues with the Evers Foundation and their children. I mean, so these are stories that, even though they happen in a specific place and time and moment, they are timeless and they are just as important. Little Rock is just as important 65 years after as it was when it happened. So these are the things we need to include. We need to have open to everyone. We need to provide access, provide programming so that the connection with this knows no bounds.
And going back a little bit to explain to the listeners Little Rock and the high school, it was after Brown versus Board of Education Supreme Court ruling, the decision that separate educational facilities are inherently unequal.
Yes.
And so this was really the spark for desegregating schools, certainly, but kind of everything in this whole integration movement in the United States.
Yeah, so Brown happens May of 54. Little Rock happens September of 57. And in that interim, you see some compliance across the country. And I think so much of the civil rights movement we think happens in the South, which is not true. And so much of the resistance to integration doesn't happen in the South. But there is, especially in this part of the country, it's called massive resistance. It's putting the foot down. It's signing something called the Southern Manifesto, which is this promise in 56 by essentially all, but not all, of the Southern congressional delegations to essentially not honor Brown, to make education a state issue and not see compliance as federally mandated. And so Brown kind of lays out the foundation for you must do this. There's a second Brown decision in 1955 that says you must begin integration with all deliberate speed because many places move really slow and they don't have a timeline for how to comply with this. But yeah, Little Rock's not the first school to integrate. It's not the first school in Arkansas to integrate, but it's this flashpoint when all eyes, think about it, television is in more homes than it's ever been at this point, post World War II. So you've got a lot of captive audiences watching Little Rock. You've got, unfortunately, the perfect politician in place here in Orville Faubus, who aspirationally wants to be probably where President Eisenhower is and sees this moment as a turning point in his career. He wants to be elected to a third term in 1958. And so he kind of makes this political bargain with a rival that kind of forces him to do what he does. And it's the first of the what we'll call the upper South capital cities to integrate schools. And so think about the eyeballs in Montgomery, Alabama, or Jackson, Mississippi, or Baton Rouge, or Atlanta that are watching what's the precedent that's going to be set in Little Rock for places that haven't complied with the law yet. And so, yeah, it's like you get all the ingredients for that recipe all at the same time, and it forms this volcanic explosion that involves the president, involves two different sets of military forces, one, state and one federal, the Screaming Eagles. Everything comes together at this place that we sit across from and involves eventually 9, 14, 15, and 16-year-olds. It's a pretty incredible story.
Very brave.
Incredibly brave. We just did a program earlier and we read part of my history book from graduate school here in Arkansas. When you read this in history books, it keys on Eisenhower and Faubus, the 101st Airborne, the National Guard. History sometimes it's like we do hero villain, we do compare contrast. And in nearly every book you look at, it briefly mentions the Little Rock Nine. It might say 9 children, maybe like children's a pejorative, right? How much could they know they're children? These were not 9 naive young people. They had been told about this. Now, they had no idea what they were going to face, but no one did. But they were brave beyond any explanation. They were courageous. Their integrity, their commitment to nonviolence. I want this opportunity. I want a better education to the extent that, you'll have to take it from my hands. I'm not going to hand it to you. It cannot be understated, but in so many cases in history books, it's completely left out.
And because I think it's important to respect them and what they did, can we say all 9 names?
Yeah, for sure. So you had one senior that year. You had Ernest Green. So the only graduate the year of integration. So he graduates in May of 1958. You've got 3 10th graders. You've got Jefferson Thomas, Gloria Ray, Karl Mark, she'll graduate the next year, but was in 10th grade for this portion. Carlotta Walls Lanier, or Carlotta Walls then. And Carlotta and Jeff will actually graduate in 1960, but there's a gap year. And in that gap year, those juniors, who we'll mention, don't even get to finish school at Little Rock Central High School because the governor closes the high schools in Little Rock. But you've got Elizabeth Eckford. You've got Minnie Jean Brown Trickey, who is expelled from Central High School and finishes in New York. Melba Patillo, Terrence Roberts, Thelma Mothershed. And so the lost year is another portion of the story that hardly outside of Little Rock or maybe Arkansas or maybe not even that doesn't get taught a lot. The recourse of integration, the change that happens in the immediate attempt by the governor to just kind of regain ground lost for his own political gain and maybe just to kind of save face. Eisenhower kind of made him blink and now I got to do something to get my base back.
Yeah, it felt like it was, we don't want them here, so nobody's going to school.
Well, yeah, and it's one of those where it's like heads I win, tails I win, because the public votes on it in Little Rock. There's a special election in the fall of 1958, which when military leaves end of May, it's a whole different landscape here in Little Rock. Much of the attention has already subsided nationally from what's happening here once the military gets them in September of 57. So the governor sees this window, holds a special session of the Arkansas legislature, and these essentially segregation laws get passed and put on the books, leading to a special election. And the heads I win, tails I win is this. If you vote yes, Little Rock, and it's only for Little Rock to vote on, if you vote yes, then you are in favor of full racial integration of all schools in the district. So not just the other 3 high schools, every other school, elementary and middle. Or if you vote no, you're against it, then the argument is we'll just stop it in the only place where it's happened, right? It's only happened in Little Rock at Central High School. And essentially, while his logic is, I think, ethically incorrect, it's really not flawed if you look at the precedent. We only could have integration in Little Rock with a military presence. And now in the absence of military, how can we continue it, right? Like it's mutually exclusive. And so by a 3-1 margin, the no's say, we don't want our child to experience what just happened across the street at Central High School. And so the governor closes Central, but for good measure, he closes the other 3 high schools as well. And so 3,600 plus high school students, including those remaining 7, minus the graduate and minus Minnie Jean, who can't come back to the school district, now have to find in-person education. And it's a really interesting scramble for some. But if you're a white student, you just have myriad options. You can go to North Little Rock. You can go to a school district here locally where the commute's not that bad. You can go to private school. Private schools seem to spring up almost overnight in and around Little Rock to serve those students. There was a school that was open for 1 year only, and it's called TJ Rainey. They were called the Rebels, of course, to I think as a nod to this story. And we have their yearbook. The yearbook from that 1 year during the lost year, if you open the front cover, full page, it's Governor Faubus. The governor tries to open a private school inside Central High School until another judge stops it. I mean, it's crazy. And the victims that year families, businesses, but it's those students. It's the Little Rock 7 who remain. It's other minority students, or it's other students who don't have the means to commute or go live in Hot Springs and go to school during the week and come back on weekends. So 3/4 of the white student population in high school that year, they find school to go to. Only 1/4 of the African American students do. And so that just kind of shocked to the educational system when schools thankfully reopen after only a year. It's prevalent again. There's slow, let's say, coming back to the norm. If 9 was the norm, there's only 5 students of color when schools reopen. And many of them face the blame like they had closed the schools the year before. And in the absence of the military, there's still violence and they are completely ostracized. So if you're Jefferson and Carlotta, I mean, think about their experience. The year 1, it's this famous year. It's a year of military. Year 2, it's at home without, Zoom or Google Classroom like kids would have today, right? And then year 3, when you come back, there's no military presence. Carlotta's house gets blown up in the spring of her senior year. I mean, it's an awful experience. And the governor's fingerprints are all over all of this. He is reelected again and again and again, leaves office by his own choosing. After 12 years in office, he's Arkansas's longest serving governor and will always be now because of term limits. To bring it back to the first question, he, after an unsuccessful rise, after, his moment in the spotlight, he tries to run again in the 1980s. He wants to come back and be governor again and can't get through the primary in Arkansas because of Bill Clinton. So Clinton stops him and Clinton signs this into law. So I don't know if that's the correct use of the word irony, but it's pretty interesting that his path is blocked again. And the creation of this place that talks about the true heroes of the story is signed into law by former governor, then President Clinton.
I think that one of the things that was surprising to me as I went through the visitor center and the museum is the amount that's dedicated the Little Rock Nine. That is worthy of a museum. But then to see the impact that they have had on movements, human rights movements since then is unbelievable.
Oh, yeah. I think one of my most favorite moments I've ever had, personally or professionally, was because of this place. This was one of those just serendipitous occasions. Minnie Jean Brown Trickey, for years, her daughter, one of her children, Spirit, was an employee here and was our chief of interpretation. So Minnie Jean would often come into the building to see her daughter. And there happened to be one occasion where there were a group of young ladies from Afghanistan who were the first young women in their family to ever go to school. And this was kind of after at least Americans became aware of, someone like Malala Yousafzai and what she had gone through and what the Taliban had done trying to stop her opportunity of education, right? Kind of a different time, different place, the same kind of intent. And these young ladies were in our classroom and we were talking with them about this story. And the extent to which they knew the story was incredible. I mean, they knew the ins and the outs of this. And they said the inspiration they drew from this story was immeasurable. I was with them and I said, hold on one second. I went and told Minnie Jean, one of the 9 who was in that room, and said, can I just borrow you for a second? She's like, 100%. She was so excited to meet these young ladies. And when I took her in the room and I introduced her, Minnie Jean, to these young ladies, the look on their faces was of just wonderment and excitement, but also knowledge. They know her story. And one of those young ladies said, you are our hero. And without missing a beat, Minnie Jean said, no, you are mine. And to watch that generational difference, there was no difference. Here's Minnie Jean years after this moment, but still advocating for the rights that these young ladies half a world away had just reached out and grabbed for themselves. And to know that link from Little Rock, Arkansas reached Afghanistan, and to know that story tied any kind of difference, generational, language, age, anything. I think it solidified for me how just important this story is. It's been really life-changing to meet people from everywhere who know the story and have been moved by it. I just helped a young lady in England. She researched and wrote and presented about the Little Rock Nine, and this story, it's timeless. And I think it speaks so well to young people because it's a story about young people in an era and an age when maybe role models are fewer and farther between. It's great that these have never left and hopefully never leave the public consciousness. I'm constantly just reinvigorated when we talk about this story and see the reaction and see the emotion and see the connection on the faces of the people that we are lucky enough to get to serve here at this place. And it's a testament to the Little Rock Nine.
So there's a quote on the wall by cultural anthropologist Margaret Mead, and it says, "Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has." And I really think that learning about and hearing about the Little Rock Nine and what they were able to do is just a spark for the rest of the world.
Yeah, and that's the wonderful part about our modern, civil rights movement is while a lot of the stories that we know or we are taught are maybe adult led, they're youth driven. You look at the Freedom Riders, you look at sit-ins, you look at Woolworth counters, you look at Freedom Summer. I mean, all these things, even the Children's March. I mean, those are children younger than the Little Rock Nine, from the McDonough Three to Ruby Bridges, all these things. Look at what young people can do. And I think that there's no coincidence that here at Ernest Green's graduation, the first of the nine to graduate is Martin Luther King, and maybe that seed planted in a not even 30-year-old man's mind. And look at what young people can do. And so I think that's why young people take motivation from this because they see if a 14 and 15 and 16-year-old student like the nine would have been, if they can do it, there's no reason why I can't, right? Every excuse has been taken. You don't need to be an adult. You don't need to be 18. You don't need to be able to vote. Those things help, probably or possibly. You don't have to have those accomplishments or those credentials to do something great. You just have to have the courage and integrity to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so I started this podcast because I wanted to help people who had said to me, I don't even know how to use a park. I don't even know how to go to a park, get comfortable with coming to parks. So I want to talk a little bit about planning a trip to this park. And first, it's part of the National Park Service, but it is a historic site. Maybe you can explain
Yes.
the difference.
Yeah. So the differences in the designations or the nomenclature of a national park to a national historic site or to a national river or a national lakeshore or a national monument. We all have the same mission agency wide, but we have maybe a different last name in that sense. So a place like Hot Springs National Park or Big Bend National Park, a national park is usually a larger place, an outdoor place that's got larger natural features to it. You think about the Smoky Mountains or Grand Canyon or Yellowstone or Yosemite. These national parks were set aside, many of them at the infancy of this agency, to protect these wild and wide open spaces. But kind of to refer back to earlier, it's really great that over the last 100 and almost 7 years that this agency has been in existence, that the focus, while it's remained on those same values of wilderness and wildness and open spaces, it's begun to focus on places like this or places that are smaller and maybe in size, but by no means smaller in scope of what they protect. And so places like Central High School National Historic Site that are more about a cultural resource and less a natural resource, so like the thermal water down the road in Hot Springs, these are places that are still so very important to be protected. The designation, I think, just helps. Maybe the visitor, it definitely helps congressionally with putting things in little small pockets, but it helps you understand maybe even in planning what the focus is going to be. If I'm going to go to a national river, it can be expected that there might be some outdoor aquatic activities that I can canoe or float or kayak. If I'm going to go to a national monument, maybe then that's something that's focusing on commemoration and honoring an individual or a place or a movement. If I go to, a national trail, that there's probably some either hiking involved or there's some kind of tracing of history through, like the Trail of Tears, or we mentioned earlier, Selma to Montgomery, right? So I think the designation, our last name, maybe national park, et cetera, probably helps better the visitor in understanding ahead of time what to expect. But I don't think by any means you should think if something is not a last name national park, then why is it part of this national park service? There's 420 plus units and not all of them have that designation. Only, 60 plus are national park, but they're no less important. They're no less valuable. And by no means should they no less be visited and enjoyed and appreciated by any visitor who seeks out that experience.
My number one tip is determine your why you want to come to a park. Do you want to be disconnected from the world? My number two in planning is always stop at the visitor center first. Every time I put a plan together, the rangers always have better ideas. They have bathrooms too, and and you get great ideas from the rangers.
I would kind of say as well, when you're planning, always go to the National Park Service website or to that park's website. We get, a lot of visitors who will use search engines and they bring their understanding or their planning, use the official National Park Service website. Go to nps.gov and make that your jumping off point. If there's any kind of alerts, whether it's construction or weather or a special event or a closure, look at park calendars to see what events might be happening when you're planning on coming. Or if you want to plan around a special event, conversely, you can do it that way. Use the NPS website to determine when you're going to go and use that, like you said, use the visitor center, use the content that is on site or online at the National Park Service.
And the website, actually, the drop down menu, it says plan your visit, categorized by you want outdoor, you want hiking, you want camping, or whatever the case may be.
Yeah. You've got half a day, you've got a full day. We definitely want to help you put together a reasonable agenda that will be enjoyable. Sometimes in an attempt to see everything, you see nothing. We want to make sure you have a meaningful visit and then use the NPS app. We, even on ours, have a 45-minute narrated with a transcript audio tour because Central High School students recorded it for us.
And here you can certainly make it an appointment visit, but also it could be like pit stop on a road trip. This is such a digestible park. In the visitor center, you have the main ranger station, and then you have the, I'm going to say museum.
Yeah, and I would kind of encapsulate them in one. The visitor center definitely encapsulates the exhibits and all the amenities that people are used to. Of course, you mentioned restrooms and water fountains and a bookstore. So the resources that we have in that bookstore to purchase, there's things about this story and gifts and things. So all the things I think you think about a film or things to watch or touchscreens or audio stations or tactiles, accessible ways to connect. We have devices that have assistive listening and captions and audio description so they can be engaged with by persons with disabilities. And so that's kind of your standard when you think about a visitor center. You want all those options afforded to you.
And one of the fascinating things, you have this wall of windows with the pick up the phone and listen to the different stories. And you're looking at the mobile station and you're looking at the high school and the street. They're showing you footage from back then and you're looking out into what it is now. And it's really just an incredible experience.
Yeah, there are places like Central High School and many other places that are protected by the National Park Service that we call 'em, it's a power of place. And so when you can be here and stand in that spot, you can look and listen and hear and kind of engage all of your senses and all of those emotions. I mean, there's no better place, I think, to connect to a story or to learn if you're teaching a lesson or to connect with that resource than to do it in the place where it happened. And we're really fortunate that a recent boundary expansion now includes the 7 houses across the street from Central High School. And while we don't own them, they have some level of protection. So when you step out onto, it's now called Little Rock Nine Way, which I think is pretty cool, the street in front of Central High School, that's a pretty recent change. But when you stand there, you don't have to imagine where's the gas station, where are the homes where people lived, where's the school. It's the same scene. Go stand on the grounds of Central High School, go stand and just look at that place and think about and imagine yourself if you're one of those 9 students. How do you walk in those doors on day 1, day 2, day 3 without giving up, without fighting back? And I think it will bring you to an emotion that hopefully will be stirred within you. And I think, like you said, it does just that.
You can come to the visitor center, then you can walk around. There's a beautiful commemorative garden. You walk down the street to the high school, and then there's the memorial bench. And I found it's interesting how, depending on where you are personally, it changes. I found it to be very reflective and meditative yesterday when I first got here. And then high school let out, and the streets and the lawn fill with kids, and to see the integration. I mean, it is a diverse group and they're playful and they're fun. And it helped me bridge that time period from the history I was reading about. I was thinking about those 9 kids going into the school. And then all of a sudden you're bombarded by 1,000 kids coming out of school for the day. And it's pretty incredible.
Yeah, I think it'd be a completely different dynamic if that school were not an active high school. When you see students walk out of a place that 65 years ago, some of those students wouldn't have been allowed to walk in those doors. it's a great testament to the achievement and what the Little Rock Nine did to unlock these opportunities for students.
So, to wrap up the conversation today, I'm going to ask you a series of questions. Just answer first thing that comes to mind.
Sure.
What's your earliest park memory?
I think my earliest park memory was I grew up in Nashville, Tennessee, and so national parks were readily accessible to us on vacations. The Smokies or Shiloh or Chattanooga and Chickamauga, or reverse it, Chick Chat. But my earliest park memory is probably Mammoth Cave. And when you're a little kid and you're underground and it's dark and it's dirty, you could crawl around. Loved it. And I can remember one time standing at the back of a park program that an interpreter was leading there at Mammoth Cave and talking to the ranger. And I just bombarded her with questions because I was just so curious. And she was so nice and kind. And I'll never forget this. When I became an employee with the National Park Service, I called Mammoth Cave and said, I'm sure she's not there anymore, but can I tell you my story and what this lady meant to me as a little 8-year-old. And they said, "Well, she's retired, but we will pass this message on." And I thought how cool that was, that my memory experience as a little kid who had no concept of what I would do someday as a grown up, how it was formed through an experience at Mammoth Cave National Park.
What made you love the parks?
I think a couple things. I had a teacher in graduate school who wrote extensively about the lost year, the year schools were closed. And I think her connection to this place was so evident that when she connected me with this place to be a volunteer in graduate school, that was a seed planted. I think in no small part, obviously, what my parents did by taking my brother and I to these places that were open and wild, like we said, the Smokies, but also places of importance in our nation's history, whether a Civil War park like Shiloh or Cumberland Gap, these beautiful places that have both natural and cultural significance. I think my parents really planted this in me. And then I think I had some really great teachers in high school who made me want to teach history. And then I figured out as an adult that these are some pretty unique outdoor and indoor classrooms we have within this agency, and that you can teach without grading papers, and that you can educate without having parent teacher conferences. And so I feel like, again, not to, my wife's a teacher, and not to diminish what teachers do, but I feel like in some ways I get to kind of be a teacher every day in a really cool setting and get to hopefully have an impact and influence on the students we get to interact with. And so I think those are the people that really helped get me to this place. I didn't get here on my own.
What's your favorite thing to do at Little Rock Central High School?
I think to tell this story, and just before we did this interview, we had a program with a diverse room of people, from people who were alive when this happened, and one man shared his memory of this, to young people who are in college right now. And so I love telling the story and seeing the change in people, because when you start the story, you then watch faces change and you see people getting upset and angry and surprised and smiles. And you want them to feel those things that the Right Nine felt when they experienced this. And so I love seeing that range and change of emotions on a visitor's face every day.
What park have you yet to visit but is on your bucket list?
I mentioned Manzanar. I'd love to go to Manzanar. We just had a program that we participated in that was a Japanese American memorial pilgrimage. There are two concentration camps, there are internment camps here in Arkansas during World War II. And like Manzanar, they took the liberties away from thousands of Japanese Americans. And I think just from experiencing those two camps at Jerome and Roar here in Little Rock, George Takei was here the other day. He was at Roar here in Arkansas as a young man. And I want to go to Manzanar and see kind of the vastness.
What are 3 must-haves that you pack when you visit a park?
Well, for sure, you need to pack protective gear. So, like water, and prepare, especially here, if you're going to come to Little Rock, I would plan for all 4 seasons in one day, plan for rain or for hot and cold. So, sunscreen, an umbrella. We mentioned water bottles, some snacks. Just have things so you can face any weather situation that you have no control over. That's number one. Number two, I would say, is something to reflect with, whether it's your phone and the notes on your phone or a journal. You're going to think things, you're going to read things, you're going to see things that you will remember in the moment, but we don't want you to forget for perpetuity. So I would say bring something to write on, or make sure you've got a way that you can capture those feelings. And then honestly, my third thing, I would bring open mindedness and curiosity and experience and ask questions. and be open enough to let yourself be immersed in the story of whatever, in this case, national park site you are, whether it's a place like Central High School or a place that's wild and wilderness.
What's your favorite campfire activity?
I love ranger talks. I love hearing somebody talk around a campfire at an amphitheater. Some of my most favorite moments or memories are those. Man, there's just something great about hearing somebody share a story around a campfire.
Tent or cabin?
Oh, tent. I like roughing it. I like hearing the sounds that a tent allows you to hear, right? The rain, the wind, the bugs. I like to sleep on the ground.
Hiking with or without trekking poles?
You know, the older I get, I think it's with. They're great for, of course, balance and stability. And I'm telling you, not all terrain's the same. And so you think you might have some sure feet, and you don't want to find out pretty quickly that you don't.
Favorite trail snack?
Anything with peanut butter. Peanut butter is my go-to, absolutely must have in the backpack when I'm going to go out on the trail.
What's your best animal sighting in a park?
When I worked at Guadalupe Mountains National Park, I was really fortunate. I got to live in the park. And so every day outside my door, I could look and see those incredible mountains. I'll never forget one morning, I let my dog Jojo out, and there was this, I'll call it a pack or family of javelinas. It's a small animal that's like a little hog. So these javelinas and my dog Jojo were having this kind of like, it was like a stare down contest, but I think they were both kind of figuring out, what the other animal was. And to just kind of watch that moment. Now, after about 10 seconds, Mama Javelina came along and really loudly clicked her teeth, "Let's roll." And then they all kind of just trotted off.
What's your favorite sound in a park?
You know what? It's this, it's silence. Some of the places I've had the most transformational moments, and you could hear nothing.
What is the greatest gift that parks give to us?
I would definitely say access because they are for everyone. I'm going to say opportunity. Opportunity is one of the kind of keywords about our story in no small part or no coincidence because it's one of the statues above the doors at Central High School has the word opportunity underneath it. So I think stories like this that are protected in places like this, parks like this, I think give people opportunity both to learn, to be transformed, to be changed, to be inspired, to be motivated. So I hope everyone who visits any national park unit takes full advantage of their opportunity to be there and just tries to consume as much as you can, read, watch, listen, talk, experience.
Brian, thank you so much for talking to us today, for sharing your passion for this park and other parks, and for being an amazing storyteller.
My pleasure. Thank you for letting us talk about this wonderful place.
Thanks for listening. Until next time, we'll see you in the parks. If you enjoyed today's episode, please be sure to like and share on your favorite podcast platform. Music for the Parks podcast is written, performed, and produced by Porter Hardy. For more information, please follow us on Instagram at The Parks Podcast or visit our website at theparkspodcast.com.